So thanks everyone for joining. This session will be on the cost optimization for workloads on SQL Managed Instance, i.e. how to achieve more with SQL Managed Instance. And it will be presented by the three of us. Nadja?
Hello, nice to meet you and nice to be with you again. My name is Mladen Andzic. I'm a program manager, one of the program managers from Microsoft team. Joined Microsoft 6 years ago, working on managed instance for the last 4.5 years, mostly in business continuity, disaster recovery, and hybrid scenarios areas. Glad to be here. Looking forward for the great discussion.
My name is Niko Neugebauer, and I'm another product manager for the SQL Managed Instance team. And I do a lot of things regarding to the evangelization of the product.
And my name is Zoran Rilak. Like Niko and Mladen, I'm a product manager in the Azure SQL product group with SQL Managed Instance. I've joined Microsoft 2 years ago, and currently I handle the networking area in the Azure SQL Managed Instance. So with that, let's just briefly go over our agenda. First, we'll be talking a little bit about what cost optimization means and what SQL Managed Instance has to say about that. And then we'll go over, and this part will be covered by Niko, we'll go over some concrete areas where cost optimization and operational excellence and other factors actually enter how you deploy and configure your SQL Managed Instance. So we'll be talking about operational excellence, performance, efficiency, reliability, security. Towards the very end, our own Mladen Andzic will give us a practical cost optimization example using a new upcoming feature. So stay tuned. This is going to be exciting. So let's talk a little bit about cost optimization first. I think this should go without saying, but let's just briefly cover it. Why cloud in the first place? Well, SQL Managed Instances, as you may have already heard, a particular flavor of Azure SQL that targets migration and modernization into the cloud. So it makes sense to talk about cloud benefits first. Roughly speaking, and a lot of ink has been spent writing this, so we can classify the benefits of the cloud into, roughly speaking, 3 categories. The first category is parsimony, or the quality of being thrifty. By being parsimonious means that when you move to the cloud, you can convert your capital expenses into operational expenses, which means that if you are hosting your hardware and software on premises, then normally you would have to budget in either 3 or 5 year time periods to replace your hardware, upgrade the licenses and do all sorts of like network upgrades and whatever takes care of your business operating smoothly. And this is normally budgeted in advance, and this works for expected maintenance, but it doesn't really work very well for unexpected growth or expansion. It doesn't work for unexpected events. So the capital expenses tend to translate into more of a lost opportunity cost than anything else. So by converting to cloud, you are actually converting your capital expenses into operational expenses, which means that you can, instead of waiting for the expenditures to write off, you're just paying for as much as you use. Again, this converts into lower opportunity cost, meaning to kickstart a new project, you don't have to invest a whole lot into new infrastructure or new licenses. You can just start and use that as much as you need, and then see how that works for you. One interesting thing to note is that for cloud, all of these benefits, and not just in the parsimony tier, but everywhere across, accumulate with the scale. So the bigger the scale, the more benefits the cloud will show. And this means both in terms of the number of individual resources that you provision in the cloud and in the breadth of the infrastructure that you're building with it. Scale will typically translate into savings across the cloud. And last but not least, parsimony also extends to cover the topic of sustainability. If several large companies combine to use virtualized hardware in a single data center or multiple availability zones, that actually translates into less hardware use and lower power consumption overall. So that is, cloud is also offering these benefits. Now, the second tier is flexibility. I want to stress this because it's often forgotten when we stress the cost and when we stress those aspects of the cloud. Flexibility means, yes, you have automatic updates, automatic, easier management, you have insights and analytics, but also being in the cloud means that you're a part of a broad ecosystem with unprecedented capabilities to build new applications that would have been very difficult to build before the cloud. Right? Just imagine building Netflix in your own basement. And last, information custodianship. Being in the cloud means that you enjoy a very enterprise-ready environment where the security is a first-class citizen, where security and of various mechanisms like key certificate secret management, multiple isolation strategies, data loss prevention, business continuity, disaster recovery, and so on are all handled for you in a manner that is approved by or supported and validated by various frameworks, both government mandated and otherwise. So you enjoy this information custodianship by being a part of the cloud. Now, why SQL Managed Instance? SQL Managed Instance is a flavor of Azure SQL that focuses on blending SQL Server compatibility with the features of being a platform as a service. What does this particularly mean? Well, Azure SQL MI, as opposed to the more traditionally used Azure SQL database, focuses on near 100% compatibility with SQL Server Enterprise Edition, which means when you provision a SQL Server Managed Instance, you don't provision a database, you provision an entire server with added benefits on top of that. But this server is not something that would be akin to an Azure SQL. It is just installed on a single machine that you have to update and manage and configure. This actually behaves as a platform as a service. You get transparent hardware refresh and transparent software upgrades and a host of other benefits that mean that are the corollaries of this service being managed for you by Microsoft. It is also very secure. It deploys in your user's private address space, so and becomes very configurable by doing so. It's reliable. It has built-in high availability, backups, and disaster recovery. It is flexible. We'll be returning to this point several times throughout the presentation. You can adjust the service tier. You can select the number of cores and the storage size assigned to it. And it is hybrid ready. You can deploy it on Azure Arc, being either on the edge or on premises. And it also has a new feature that we're very excited about, the distributed availability group with an on-prem SQL server. There is a recent study published by Forrester that shows that for a specific class of for a specific group of top tier or strategic customers who have migrated from on-premises to Azure SQL Managed Instance, it has been shown that on average, they took under 6 months to profitability by migrating to SQL MI. And the reasons why they were able to do this was there are three positive reasons, right? One is obviously by avoiding the infrastructure and maintenance costs. Instead of doing everything on-prem, transparent hardware and software upgrades would yield, again, CapEx and OpEx benefits. The other reason is a 40% improvement in database administrators' productivity, achieved by offloading the management and the provisioning with the new capacity and effectively allowing the DBAs to spend their time doing more impactful business things. The third reason is a 20% improvement in IT staff productivity by automating data backups, app compatibility, security patches, version upgrades, and integration with other PaaS and SaaS services. All these benefits are partially offset by a slight increase in the additional cost factors. Obviously, the migration is not for free, and there are annual license costs. So when you migrate and when you switch to this, there are going to be there can be some changes in the licensing arrangements, which may incur additional costs. But when this all balances out, Forrester's study has shown that at around the 6-month mark, customers who have migrated to SQL MI were able to achieve profitability. Okay, so how do we optimize the cost of SQL Managed Instance? Well, yes, we do have a magic button, only it actually never worked, right? It's actually a very complicated process optimizing the cost of a particular service, especially when we talk about a database service, because there are so many factors that enter play. How your workloads behave. Can you consolidate your workloads? Can you anticipate the future needs and the growth? Should you budget, again, simply, should you budget in advance for your load, for your peak capacity, or should you not? What is your peak capacity? What are the other business requirements that dictate the particularities of your deployment? What's the geolocation? What regions do you need to be present in? So on and so forth. And not even to mention that in determining the relative cost effectiveness of a migration, the other end of the equation is very often poorly understood, which is the total cost of ownership part. How much are you currently spending to do everything that you would have covered by switching to a cloud solution? So this is a very complex thing, and Microsoft has developed a framework to analyze this. And Niko will be talking more about this, but I want to show you a couple of low-hanging or easy ways to immediately provision a Azure SQL managed instance at a lower cost than what may seem at first. First and foremost, reuse SQL Server licenses. Yes, SQL managed instance does offer a pay-as-you-go model, but if you have an active SQL Server license with software assurance, you can actually use a feature of software assurance called Azure Hybrid Benefit to apply this license to the vCores in the cloud, to Azure SQL MI. And the math goes like this. One core of a standard edition license will translate to one core general purpose tier. One core in the enterprise edition SQL license will translate to one core in the business critical MI tier. And then there's the ability to cross over. There's a 1-to-4 ratio. I'm not going to go into this a whole lot, but no matter which edition you have of these two, you can find a way to convert it into whichever tier you need. Ultimately, this does mean that if you use Azure Hybrid Benefit with a pre-purchase license, you will actually enjoy savings over pay-as-you-go. And this actually makes sense because by pre-purchasing the license, you're offloading the risk to yourself, rather than Microsoft paying that you may at some point just leave. This is basic cloud math.
But by the way, just wanted to add, I think it's a really crucial point for customers to understand. There is no standard edition. There are no limitation connected to the edition on managed instance. When you are migrating to managed instance, you are getting all the enterprise features. You are able to rebuild your indexes with more than 2 CPU vCores. You are getting all the online and resumable operation. You getting the much loved resource governor. It's all out of the box on the managed instance. So it's not one. In my experience, it's not even one by one upgrade, because you are upgrading definitely for the better.
You're exactly right, Niko. Thanks for making a pause there. Yes, there is no standard edition MI. This translates all to the right-hand side, all is enterprise edition. Good call. All right, so there are a couple of more ways to save. You can use reserved capacity, and this is just an Azure-wide feature. You can pre-purchase certain compute capacity and then apply it towards provisioning a new managed instance. By doing so, you can purchase it either in 1 or 3 year chunks. When you provision your SQL Server managed instance, you actually can take this from the reserved capacity and enjoy up to 72% discount on compute costs. So this does not concern the licensing. This is just the compute. One other way is to use the Azure Dev Test pricing, or development testing pricing, which applies to non-production workloads only. Comes up to around a 55% discount. But most importantly, you can combine all three: Azure Hybrid Benefit, Reserve Capacity, and Dev Test. And this would yield the most cost-effective way to run Azure SQL managed instance for now. And I'm not including any licensing benefits or anything that you may be able to negotiate with whomever you're purchasing from. There are a couple of things we just mentioned. Is that SQL managed instance offers a range of tiers and sizes. I mentioned 2 tiers: general purpose and business critical. So you can choose between the two. General purpose is typically your tier 3 and tier 2 workloads, and business critical is very much more performant, and it offers some added benefits. But as you will see, it's more expensive. It does offer you the ability to choose in the compute size from 4 to 80 vCores associated with a single managed instance. There's the ability to choose the size of the storage associated from 32 gigabytes to 16 terabytes, again, depending on the tier and compute number, of course. The hardware generation is also something you can choose from. And with this is the associated vCPU to memory ratio. So the more vCPUs you purchase, and the more would be the total memory associated. Configurable backup storage and redundancy, and instance pools, which is a way to overbook a specific managed instance and run multiple copies of SQL Server on it. This is currently still in preview. Stay tuned. All of this comes with the ability to resize on the fly. You can resize the instance or change the service tier with a minimum downtime, which registers as a really brief blip in the connectivity. So when the need arises to upscale your workloads or downscale it, this happens with minimum downtime. And this, of course, can be automated. You can set up various strategies to monitor the performance of your SQL MI and the utilization of resources. You can read its state by using PowerShell, command line apps. You can query the system catalog views and so on. And then you can apply logic apps, Azure Automation, Azure Functions, or even in-house scripts to react to specific triggers and keep your workloads cost effective. Now, I'm going to hand over to Niko, who will be talking more about our custom optimization framework, in specific about the operational excellence, performance efficiency, reliability, and security.
All right. Let me know if my correct screen is visible.
Yes, sir.
All right. So let's talk about the operational excellence or cost optimization for workloads on Azure SQL Managed Instance. You might find my presentation a little bit, at the beginning, overreaching and talking about the concepts, but we are definitely diving into the really exciting stuff, not to say at least. So what is operational excellence? So operational excellence is a set of operation processes that keep system running in production. It's how you operate the system. And how you operate the system starts with how you develop the system, how you provision it, how you deploy it, how you operate, how you do your maintenance of it. And it's very important that you start the whole process of working, or maybe we'll review your process of working with managed instance with this mindset. Operational excellence is equally important, the team culture. For the last couple of years, there has been, played over and over again the importance of the team culture. But without the experimentation and growth for the platform as a service, PaaS services, your application will stuck, because we keep on introducing new feature, we keep on improving the product as the customer running it. And if your team is unable to experiment with the new features and find a way of maybe optimizing or improving some of the aspects, you will not have the cost benefits. You need to have the incident response plans, the disaster recovery, et cetera, but don't forget the team culture. It's absolutely essential, especially in the modern time. So talking about build and release processes, probably you might have heard about this, but you should be considering provisioning your infrastructure as a code. If you have never heard about provisioning infrastructure as a code, I'll tell you just a couple of words and I'll explain away later. Terraform, Ansible, and even us, Microsoft, we are releasing some of the kits to improve your possibilities. The provisioning with infrastructure as a code allows the customer to easily provision one or more instances being equal. You do not have to check all the possible features. It's kind of a, even the PowerShell DSC, for those of you who remember, there was a phrase taken from Star Trek, make it so. So this is the provisioning with infrastructure as a code. I think the last 6-7 years, a lot of businesses have moved into the continuous integration and continuous delivery. You should be considering the tools that allow you to do so. You should be using a project-driven approach to deliver your code to relational database. I'm confident it's obvious, but I still want to reinforce automated testing methods. You should not rely on manual testing. You should be avoiding configuration drift through configuration as a code, because it's so easy to change some of the parameters. You know it even from the SQL Server as a standalone product. You can reconfigure something and then system works in a different way. And oh my God, who done what? Why should we go now and scale up to sustain the workload? That's kind of some typical problems. So below, on the bottom part of my screen, you can see some of the tools. So my personal preference goes with the Terraform, well-known framework for provisioning and configuring with infrastructure as a code. And as a matter of fact, SQL Managed Instance support fully Terraform for precisely 1 year. Last September in 2021, we released in general availability full support for Terraform. You can see the beautiful cat from the GitHub, which should allow you to deliver with your CI/CD pipelines, and use even the backpack to deliver the new versions of your platform, and consider using the SQL database project if you are developing your database code in Visual Studio Code, for example, or Azure Data Studio. So cost optimization for operational excellence. Surprise! My dear colleague Zoran was talking so many valuable things about how flexible cloud can be, but with great power comes a great responsibility. If you design your application badly in the cloud, you pay for it. If you are able to optimize it, and that goes to all of you performance tuners, you can absolutely, with the right applicational design and performance, lower the cost. It's the most effective way, the right design. You should be monitoring it constantly. Whatever metrics you are using, whatever solution, you need to know the state of your application that is using managed instance. Consider using one of the available APM solutions available on the market. Think about the code deployment. I gotta tell you, a battle-hardened story of a code deployment in the previous life before joining Microsoft. And that's not many years ago, to say at least. One customer would take up to 18 hours to deploy the code. That started with the wrong application design. And 18 hours of a full code deployment would mean 18 hours of a downtime. And if it is critical for your business, that means real money. If you optimize your code deployment, you can earn more money. Infrastructure provisioning. We'll go into more details. Testing. Did I mention testing? So operational monitoring. Consider some of these following Azure services. Azure Monitor. We do have some offers in the preview, but you can also set up some of monitoring by yourself, or you can use even other third-party tools together. We are compatible with the resource health. You should be using Azure policy for ensuring that, even not only on operation, but from the security standpoint. And I remember a wonderful feature of storage endpoint, which supports the policy of, for example, limiting the storage accounts that are accessible from your managed instance. And from the cost optimization is, don't think that taking backup into external storage or even extracting some data will not cause you cost. It might be a minor one, but a couple of grains here and there, it can lead to consequences. So let's go into more practical stuff, the operational excellence for SQL. I'll talk about the resource location. I'll talk about the service tier selection, one of the key components, and I'll explain you the choices that you can make. The hardware selection. And you might say, oh, no, Niko, that's not really operational. That's a performance thing. Wait, but if you think about operational and monitoring, what does it do? You choose a different hardware tier and you get more memory, and you set a specific, let's say 99% threshold for the memory, for, or for 99% alert for the CPU, it will change because the hardware changes. So it impacts your operational excellence, and it will impact the time that your team will spend working, analyzing, or trying to fix the situation on SQL. And the time people spend working is, used to say, the most expensive resource. Next one, storage reservation. Absolutely. You pay for what you reserved, not for what you have consumed, because we will never auto-increase the storage. The customer needs to do it. So it's a very, very important operational task. Out of failover groups, how can we ever escape them? And that's it. Let's go into the details. So resource location. I made this example today. I went into our portal and I selected 2 different regions. And this is just an example. And your results will vary depending on the regions and other criteria. But here we go. I am provisioning a general purpose standard series instance with just 8 CPU vCores and 256 gigs. I mean, out of the box, I didn't play a lot with it. And East US, you can see it's around $1,500. And in UK South, it's just a little bit more expensive. Think about this as something when you design your solution, because you might have 1, 2, or even more regions where it doesn't really matter for the business, doesn't really matter for the latency, for the performance, and you can make either choice is fine, but the cost will vary. So I mentioned general purpose service tier. What is this? I mean, general purpose service tier is something we believe the tier that is suited the best for the most business workloads. We provide you with a built-in HA. Think about this as a kind of a failover cluster. So 1 primary instance replica, and we have a pool with the standby replicas. Should something happen on software hardware, this one will detach itself from the remote storage, which we support up to 16 terabytes, and a standby will take over. So it's a kind of a failover time. The other one is a business critical. Business critical is more expensive. Well, why would you say? Because it's the only service tier, which actually the only service tier in PaaS that provides you not with network removed, network detached storage. It provides you a local SSD. With this local SSD, you can achieve a latency that cannot be achieved on any other service, right? Because we provide you with the hardware. Beyond that, we provide you with 4 replicas, 4 synchronous replicas with the availability groups. So 1 primary, 2 standby invisible for the customer replicas, and 1 readable replica available out of the box. Absolutely amazing. So you can see an example in a random, let's say, region that I selected on the pricing. You see that it's so different, but if you can also notice that we do not charge you 4 times more, even though we provide you with 4 times more resources. So let's say you go and provision 16 terabytes on business critical service tier. Under the hood, we provide you with 4 times 16, 64. Just to make you think and understand. Talking about the hardware selection, we have the standard series, which you already know. It was known previously under the name of Gen 5, but we have already released in the general availability, I think it was like the middle of July, so kind of middle of July 2022, if you're watching the recording, the premium series. Intel Ice Lake, the latest and the greatest blazingly fast CPU, which provides you with even more storage and more memory. we don't give you just 5.1, but 7 gigabytes of RAM. And there is currently in preview premium series memory optimized, which is even faster, gives you almost a double of the premium, 13.6 gigabytes of RAM, and allows you to reach on both business critical and general purpose 16 terabytes. So how do you select it? Something like this on our portal. Let's talk about the storage reservation. Storage reservation has some implications. We do have a connection between the vCores and the maximum amount of storage depending on the service tier and the selected hardware. And the storage reservation, as I mentioned, is one of the key factors for the price you are paying, because we charge you for what you reserve, because we guarantee it for you. So I changed some of these things. Actually, it's I think a little bit stuck here. I just this one is the difference. Not the title is wrong. It's not storage reservation. My slides got a little bit moved. I'm sorry for that. But that's the difference on the prices between standard series, premium series, and premium series memory optimized. So that's basically to close what I was showing you on the hardware selection. But the storage reservation still here, and we do charge you for what you reserve. Auto failover groups. I mean, we can talk pretty much about auto failover groups. I've heard that Mladen's favorite topic is auto failover groups, or at least it was for a number of years. But from the cost perspective, right now, as of today, is that we are presenting this to you, you are paying double. Why? Because we provide you two managed instances that you can spread geographically between anywhere around the world. So you might need to think how you monitor it. Auto failover group has a failover time of automatic failover of 1 hour. Is it enough for your business? Will your monitoring software react on that instantly, or will it tolerate? It's a kind of like a lot of very interesting questions, operational questions, cost questions, because if you are awakening somebody for something that really doesn't really matter for the business, was it a good idea? I don't think so. So now it's the last exciting slide, I guess, because I was beaten to convince, no, I'm kidding, of course not, to give you a sneak peek preview in the not so distant future of Azure SQL MI, So we are adding a couple of very exciting features for the operational excellence. In not so distant future, we have just announced yesterday the resumable online constraint edition. So when you create a table, if you need to add a constraint to this, let's say primary key, typically it will block all the workload and access to this table, exclusive lock. But now, as of today, in preview, you can already create a constraint which will be built in the background, and you can suspend it and then resume, just like building indexes or rebuilding the indexes. We already announced publicly that we are running a private preview of database copy and move operation. So customer can take a database from one managed instance and copy or move it to a different one. Stay tuned for the upcoming announcements. We are about counting the minutes, hours, days, weeks until the premium series memory optimized hardware will go into general availability. The same is for the 16 terabytes for business critical service tier. These are some of the most asked and requested questions we have been receiving as of lately. The next one is this. So I think some of you might be happy to hear that we will be providing a start and stop or pause and resume capability. So if you do not need to run 24/7 your managed instance, you will be able to stop and then resume it. Mladen, would you like to add something on this feature?
Just to admit that I stole your exclusivity an hour ago. I already spoke about start stop. Other than that, yeah, like people were happy. So yeah, I'm sure there are also folks on this call who are happy about this announcement.
Oh, I think it's one of the most exciting features we have announced so far in this presentation. All right, so let's talk about the performance efficiency, right? That's where a lot of the DBAs and developers can shine. Once again, start with your application design. Also, if you're using something like a hybrid service broker or distributed transaction, the features which we are supporting on managed instance, understand the challenges, before implementing them. Run performance tests, keep on monitoring, identify performance improvements, because if you, let's say, running a 32 CPU vCore managed instance and you monitor and you see you using 30% of its resources, well, maybe you can scale it down. It will be a huge saving, something you cannot easily do in a regular data center. And of course, invest in the capacity planning. So design for scaling. Scale it as a unit. Take advantage of the capability of scaling the platform. You do not have to open a contractual negotiation with Azure. It's already been taken care of, right? So partition the workload. Think about the features that you can distribute maybe between different databases. Avoid locking and blocking, maybe, even avoiding latches. Avoid client affinity, etc., etc. I mean, just all of you who are database administrators or professional SQL developers, this is nothing, groundbreaking for you. You know this. So use data partitioning. I want to stress, even, putting my technical hat on, there are even features which started in SQL Server 2000, which use the partitioning, which can absolutely benefit the customers. So don't discard the old methods just because they're old. They can still be very, very efficient. And optimize and tune T-SQL. This is something you can do a great cost optimization. And don't forget, I will be mentioning, of course, our favorite tool, which is Query Store. It will be very, very helpful for any past services. So performance efficiency, compression features, data retention. In my professional life, I've seen over and over again how many times until somebody asks the question, why do we keep the data from 1974 and nobody knows? Because in the 60s, we could not remove the data. There are opportunities, and we give you some amazing tools for archiving your data. Use a query store. Resource location again, service tier selection, hardware selection, of course, affect your performance efficiency. And storage reservation for data and log files and general purpose service tier. This is a bread and butter. You will not even get the performance that you can have unless you do the right things. So out of all over groups has to do something with performance. Who would tell? And again, use testing, use monitoring, etc., etc. So compression features. Use a row, page, column store archival compression, because you can compress your data. It will be more efficient, more performant, right? Because reading from disk is still the slowest element of the query processing. Typically, there are exceptions if you have a bad query, right? But The less storage you occupy, you can eventually lower the reserved storage and thus have a very positive monthly impact on your costs. Consider using data retention, data archival, data removal. Why do you store the data if you do not use it? If you do not need it, there are no obligations for that. Query store, that's, I wonder which team has developed such an amazing features. I can tell, Mladen, do you know the team who developed this feature? Have you heard about it?
Yeah, I think that's the same team that built Managed Instance a few years ago.
Oh, incredible, ladies and gentlemen, everybody. This is like, use it, just use it. Use the query store on Managed Instance. So anyway, I'm such a shameless promoter. Use the selection of the location, which of course affects the cost, as I mentioned previously, but it affects your performance. In which way? Latency. The tier selection, right? Do you need a general purpose with a remote storage? Do you need a local storage? Do you need this or that? Do you need a readable replica? That's a business critical, tough decision. The hardware, the premium series and premium series memory optimized hardware is a couple of hardware generations in front of the standard series. A couple, and they're incredibly fast. Check out some of the papers our partners have published and check out do some testing. We're excited. You see, we give you even more memory, and as a database person, memory a lot of times mean performance because databases are memory-hungry applications. Who would tell? So storage reservation for data and log files on general purpose service tier means better throughput. It will affect, most probably, if you need more performance, it will impact negatively you on the cost side. Why? Because you will have to reserve more storage and you pay for the reservation, not for the consumption. I think I said it for the 7th time already in this presentation, but it's still good. Out of failover groups, right? Oh, why would it impact my performance? Well, you just copy and replicate asynchronously information, which need to be read from your primary replica. So there will be an impact. And maybe, and not maybe, you can read from the secondary replica. You can do active reads on it, so it will give you, with a good distribution, good impact. Looking into the future of Azure SQL MI, again, for this topic, we have the premium series memory optimized hardware, which was already mentioned, resumable online constraint edition, already mentioned and already released in the public preview. Reliability, and I think I need to speed it up a little bit. So on the reliability, designed for the business requirements, designed for the failure, drive the automation, test it. Do not test the backups. We do them for you. Test the restores if you need to. So define availability and recovery targets. You need to have your own SLA to understand what you need. Maybe, and just maybe, you need to scale up your service tier and will allow you this just temporary in order to restore your backups faster. That's something not a lot of customers are thinking through. Test regularly, automate testing as much as possible, etc., etc. We will be sharing the slides. I mean, assume that you can hear me. I don't think you need me to read all my slides. And if you are unable to read the slides, we'll share them anyway. So the best practices is testing regularly, or would expect, test for resiliency, design backup strategy, but test a restore strategy. Don't forget, if you are using geo or zone redundant storage, you can actually restore in a different region right away. So you can test your out of failover and the resiliency without even creating out of failover groups. Codify steps for failover and fallback, plan for regional failures, think about auto failover groups. It's absolutely amazing feature. Implement retry logic for the cloud. If we are doing maintenance, and we do have the maintenance windows, you can define when we will do that, but still you need to implement the retry logic. We do have also the drivers, we release the drivers which will support easy implementation of the retry logic. Configure test health probes and segregates read and writes with the help of auto failover groups. Reliability slide, already show it to you. So resource location, auto failover groups, and backups. On the backups, I'll talk about two things. Point in time restore, you have 4 current choices for the backups: zone redundant, geo redundant, zone redundant, locally redundant. Here is the information about what will happen, how will it affect. But think about this: the more available, the more copies there are, more expensive it will be. Doesn't mean you should go for LRS, locally redundant storage, because that's a reliability section. This is where you guarantee that things go right for your business. You can configure also the long-term retention policies if you need them. If you do not need them, if you do not need to go over the 30 days, why would you configure them? If you will not, you will save some costs. Looking into the future of Azure SQL MI, we will be making available read, access, geozone redundant storage, and answering the question that we were asked right at the beginning, the multi-zone support for Azure SQL managed instances will be coming. We will not be answering when it will become, but let us all hope that soon enough. Security, confidentiality, integrity, availability. Public cloud means you need to be careful about the access. You need to protect. Microsoft gives you huge amount of tools, the threat protection, the governance, the policies that you can apply by default and force them so nothing wrong with the design can be implemented. Use the security principles, plan the resources and how to harden them. Most of this, actually, the security costs you money. Those who do not care for the security do not care about the cost optimization, because I think yesterday there was a great example. One well-known company had a security breach and they have posted around 10 security positions for hiring. This will not be cheap. And don't forget that in many countries in Europe, in US, I heard in the South America as well, there are, the regulations and fines if you do not comply with them. So, gotta be aware. Use identity-based storage access control. We have implemented so many great features that allows you a precise control which storage is accessible, etc., etc. We have the user managed identity with which you can even control on the Azure Key Vault which items are accessible or not. So here is our the optimization framework, and with that, Vlade, please take over and drive us into beautiful practical part.
Thank you very much, Niko. Next slide, please. I won't be sharing yet. Yeah, so it's hard to unmute after Niko's really excellent presentations, but at the end of the presentation, we agreed while preparing that we should have one of the features, going the deep dive into this feature and having some of the T-SQL code during the presentation, right? So the choice was data virtualization, right? What's the data virtualization in Azure SQL Managed Instance? Let's start from the very simple definition. So if you want to practice data virtualization, you should just transparently query your data sets from wherever your data is stored at. In the case of managed instance, it means that you can have a a bunch of files storing terabytes of data somewhere in Azure Data Lake, be it CSV, Parquet, or JSON file format. Those files are coming from our IoT devices, from, I don't know, oil wells, from the autonomous cars, whatever. So it's a bunch of the data. So to basically analyze this data from a SQL managed instance, you don't necessarily need to do an ETL operation and load this data into managed instance. Back to Niko's point, do you really need that all of your data is here on the storage that you need to pay for, and not just for the storage, but also for the backup copies of the data. This way, you can have all the necessary hot data, let's say, in your local tables, having so-called external tables created, which is nothing more but pointers to the actual data in the Azure Data Lake created in your managed instance, and then running the T-SQL queries, joining those the result sets, and deriving the insights both from the local and externally stored data. So next would be a short demo. Let me now share my screen. One of the sentences that we hear very often. Do you want to continue? I do. What I do want to present. Sorry for this. The entire screen. Okay, let's share. So what we have here, we have I'm connected basically to the SQL managed instance. Niko, can you confirm that I'm sharing the
Yes,
SSMS window?
Beautiful.
Okay, thank you. So I created an empty database. You can see that there is nothing out of the database. To basically push this to the extreme, we don't have any local data here. Still, what we can use the open rule set functionality available in managed instance and query the public data set containing the data about the COVID cases over the previous few years. All I have is to point my open rule set to a public location, say that it is a Parquet format, and voila, we ran the query successfully. Let's see the result set, hopefully. Yes, there it is. First rows came very fast. We can do different types of the analytic queries here, aggregate this data, whatever. So the Cyprus seems to be the country with the most new cases based on the total number of confirmed cases a few days ago, etc. So, okay, this is just, these were like exploratory queries that I ran on my managed instance on top of the Parquet files stored somewhere in the Azure storage. This is the name of the storage account, this is the name of the container, and then this is the location of these files. Now, this was just for the exploratory purposes. I mentioned previously external tables, so I have to create a couple of helping objects before I create external tables. So I need to specify the format. I need to create, basically, we have an object called data source, external data source, encapsulating the details of where the data is stored and how to connect. I don't have any credentials here because this is public data set. In most of your cases, you will probably also have to provide the credentials. Okay, so basically I'm now running the same query as last time, just to figure out what are the data types and columns in my data set. So these are all the columns, all the data types. I already copied this data into the next important T-SQL statement, which is creating external table. So I have the types, the names of the columns, I have the location, the name of the exact Parquet file, and the file format and the data source information that I previously created. Okay, so let's create this external table. Again, table is created very fast. Why? Because I haven't loaded any data. This is just an empty shell pointing to this location. So let's see, I now have this table, and let's run the same analytic query here. For the first time, it takes a bit longer, but it's pretty fast, I would say, right? So here we now our external table queried directly from the managed instance, while the data is stored in Azure Data Lake, and everything is pretty fast. Time check, we are okay. Let me switch back to the PowerPoint quickly. Okay, so this was a demo. Just a quick wrap up regarding what we've seen with data virtualization. So this is an example of a feature that ticks multiple boxes from the framework that Niko just explained. From the operational excellence perspective, basically with these queries, data virtualization queries, you have a simplified data pipelines. You don't have to maintain your ETL. You don't have the data latency. You don't have overnight jobs and similar thing. It's also easier to maintenance because you don't have any third-party tools in your pipeline. Regarding the performance efficiency, so back to Niko's point, it's not about having the best performance, it's about having the best bang for the bucks. So here you can hit the right balance between the performance and cost. Of course, the performance when querying the remote files in the data lake won't be exactly the same as when you are querying the local data on your SSD disk, but as you saw, it was pretty fast, and then it costs less because you're not paying for the local storage on the managed instance, and you're not paying for the backups of those data. So Niko already showed some of the prices. Of course, compute is the main component of the price, but storage price and backup price are also not negligible. And finally, basically back to the topic of how security can be very expensive. Here with the data virtualization, we are not improving the security, but at least we are keeping the high level of the security that you have with your locally stored data. So you still have the AAD integration you need to provide your instances managed identity to actually connect to the storage account. You have all of the perks of the managed instance related to the networking setup and so on. So hopefully this was a good illustration of how one specific feature that we, by the way, GA'd last week helps with the multiple aspects of the cost optimization. Okay, that was all for today. Niko, would you like to close?
Special thanks to Microsoft for supporting Data Platform Geeks and SQL Server Geeks community initiatives. Thank you, everybody, for attending. We are happy to hear more questions. There are 3 ways to win prizes in the meantime. Post your selfie with the hashtag DPS 2022, I guess, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I'm not sure about Instagram. Anyway, give sessions and conference feedback. This one is really, without any jokes, hugely appreciated. And please, please, please visit the sponsors and exhibitors. This will help to enable the repetition and continuation of the Data Platform Virtual Summit. Thank you so much.
3 more minutes for questions. So anyone, if there are any unanswered questions in the chat, or if anyone wants to unmute and ask directly, feel free.
There are no more questions coming in the chat, Vladimir.
I believe we answered all of the questions in the chat.
Thus far, yes.
Okay, sounds good.
Just let me see if there are more.
There was one question, I think, regarding provisioning speed. Have you tackled that one?
Yes, I answered that we are very aware
cool.
about the provisioning times, and stay tuned.
Cool.
It's a saying, good David Barbarian. Hi, David.
Yeah, you have messaged Niko that you will take one more question towards the end. Any plan for multi-AZs with SQL in mind?
Yes, we have answered that precisely during the presentation by announcing that multi-AZs are coming for SQL MI.
Yeah, David is asking the same thing again. That's fine. Thank you.
All right. If people are no more questions, let's get back to sleep or work or whatever. Please continue watching the streams, and there are beautiful sessions as well. Yes.
And
Thanks for joining.
Cost optimize. Thank you.
Thank you all. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.